All right, so these examples I'm going to be doing will be from your support 4.8 section. So I'm going to go share the screen of the homework. I want to show you the problems as I work through them. So problem number 1, I got 5r plus 1/4 squared. All right, so let's go to my screen and watch me work this. Whoops. All right, so let me focus y'all real quick and get it locked. All right, so when you see 5r plus 1/4 squared, that's a binomial being squared. So you want to start out by writing it twice, because that's what that exponent's telling me to do. And then you're going to multiply this by FOILing. So 5r times 5r is 25r squared. So you treat the r's like they got an exponent of 1. And when you multiply variables, you just add those exponents. So that was that. Now 5r times 1/4. So 5 times 1 divided by 4. Remember, I don't want the decimal, so I hit math and enter twice. And that's going to give me a 5/4 r, because I had 1 r on that, okay? Now 1/4 times 5r will give me another 5/4 r. And then at the end, 1/4 times 1/4, so 1 divided by 4. Now, so what I would do on that, and really, I would put everything in parentheses. So 1 divided by 4 times 1 divided by 4. Put them in parentheses, then you won't have no mistakes. When you hit enter, remember I get a decimal, so I hit math and enter twice, and I should get a 1/16. So multiplying fractions, top times top is 1, 4 times 4 on the bottom is 16. Now, those are like terms, so you bring down that 25r squared. 5/4 plus 5/4 is going to give me 2.5, and then math and enter twice. I get a 5/2, so that's going to be a 5/2 r. So the r stays the same when you're adding, and then at the end will be my 1/16. So that'd be my final answer. Now I'm not going to put these answers in to save time. So what I'll do is I'll move to my next one. So this will be number 2. And this one looks like what? R minus 5f squared. All right, so let's go screen. All right, so r minus 5f squared, same thing. I got to write that twice. And then FOIL it. So r times r, 1 plus 1 is a r squared. Remember, if there's not an exponent, we treat it like a 1. So I did r times r. R times a negative 5f is going to be a negative 5fr. So I just put the letters in alphabetical order. In the middle, negative 5f times r is a negative 5fr. And then at the end, negative 5f times negative 5f is a positive. 5 times 5 is 25. F times f is f squared. All right, then the same thing. The only thing I can do is add my like terms. So bring down to r squared. Negative 5 and negative 5 is negative 10 FRs plus my 25 F squared. So y'all, I would go put that in. And then move on to the next. So 3 has an x squared plus 7 squared. So let's go work that. All right, so once again, x squared plus 7 squared, I'm going to write that twice. X squared plus 7 times the x squared plus 7. And then FOIL again. So you're learning how to FOIL in this section. So x squared times x squared. 2 plus 2 is 4. X squared times 7 is just a 7x squared. And notice everything's positive, so all this is going to be positive, okay? 7 times x squared is a positive 7x squared. And then 7 times 7 is 49. And if you noticed on everything else, I had like terms on these. Anytime you're squaring a binomial like this, all these are being squared, you're going to have like terms in the middle. So the x4 comes down. 7 plus 7 gives you 14 x squared. And notice I never change those letters when I'm adding, okay? And then at the end, bring down your 49. So y'all, we would go put that in and move to the next. All right, so let's see what they got on me for number 4. All right, so now they're trying to turn up the heat on me. 4r squared minus 4d squared squared. All right, so here we are, which means we're going to write this twice. 4r squared minus 4d squared times 4r squared minus 4d squared. All right, here we go. 4r squared times 4r squared. 4 times 4 is 16r. 2 plus 2 is 4. 4r squared minus 4d squared, they're multiplying, so 4 times negative 4 is a negative 16. R squared and d squareds are going to stay the same because they have nobody to multiply that looks like them. So you can't change the variables if it don't have the same variable, okay? Now I know what the middle is going to give me, negative 16 d squared r squared. And I always just put my letters in alphabetical order. That way I can tell my like terms are really like terms. All right, then a negative 4d squared times negative 4d squared is a positive. 4 times 4 is 16. D squared times d squared is a d to the fourth. And you guessed it, the last thing is add those like terms. So the 16r4 will come down. Negative 16 and negative 16 give you negative 32 d squared r squared, and then bring down your positive 16 d to the fourth. No more like terms, so nothing else can be added or subtracted. So we put that answer in and move on. All right, so next question. Oh, so this is just a true or false. So if x plus 2 times x plus 3 equals 24, then they're saying either x plus 2 equals 24 or x plus 3 equals 24. Well, y'all remember, anytime you got a quadratic equation, you got to get everything set up equal to 0. And then once you factor that trinomial or binomial, you got to take all them factors and set them equal to 0. 0 is the only number that I can guarantee one of its factors. So since these got these equal to 24, we're going to put false on that. And then let's see what they're saying. The sentence is false because the left side should be written in standard form, or it's false, although the left side of the equation is factored, the right side of the equation is non-zero. It would only make sense if there was a 0 obtained on one side of the equation, so it's false because of that reason, because we don't have our 0 on that side. So you'd put that and move on. This one says, true or false? Every quadratic equation has 2 solutions. Y'all, that could be false because notice what I put. Some quadratic equations involve the square of a binomial, like we were just foiling, and they only have one solution because both of the factors would be the same. So if you had an x plus 3 times an x plus 3 equal to 0, well, when you solved both of them x plus 3s, you would only get one answer of a negative 3. So that's one of the reasons, because you could get a repeating single answer, or if it's not factorable, you could get no solution. Okay, so that's why I put false on that. Next one is true or false. the number 0 is never a solution of a quadratic equation. Well, y'all, that's definitely false. Especially if you got a GCF, the GCF always equals 0 on that. So that's definitely false. It can be a solution. Remember, if when you substitute 0 back into that equation and you get a true statement, then that means the 0 is a solution of that quadratic. So we're just getting you used to what these answers sort of mean, okay? All right, this one I got this is number 8, r squared plus 6r equals 16. All right, so I'll actually work that out. All right, so the first thing, like what I just said, where that 16 is, that needs to be 0. Well, to make that a 0, you would subtract 16 from both sides of the equals. Now notice, none of these are like terms, so I'm just going to put them in order. R squared plus 6r minus the 16 equals 0. Now to solve that, I would factor it. So to get an r squared, you would have an r and an r. Now check this out. Anytime the last number is negative, you'll have unlike signs for those factors. One will be positive, one will be negative. What I do know is that the larger factor that I get will be positive like the middle number. So now I find factors of 16. 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. One of these, since that's negative, one of these factors will subtract and get me a 6. And the factors would be 8 and 2. Since 8 is the larger of the two factors, it's going to have the same sign as the middle number. So the 8 will be positive and the 2 will be negative. All right, now what's cool, I'm going to send y'all a program in a little bit. You'll go into your programs, go to factor number 7. Now check this out. You're just going to put in these 3 numbers. 1 for the A, 6 for the B, and then negative 16 for the C. You got to have them already set equal to 0. Once you got it all set to 0, I hit enter. It's going to give me my factors. Notice that, x plus 8, x minus 2. Now remember, in MATLAB, the calculator only breaks everything down in x's. You just got to remember what letter you're using when you're doing the MATLAB, okay? Now, at this point, I would take both of them and set them equal to 0 and solve them. So the first one, I would subtract 8. I get r is a negative 8. Second one, I would add 2 and get r is a positive 2. Now, I'll tell you this. If you hit program and go to quadratic, the program I already gave you, quadratic will solve any of these quadratic equations. If it's an equation, you can use the quadratic equation to solve it. So A would be 1, B would be 6, C would be negative 16. Now watch, when you do the quadratic formula, it actually gives you the final answers. So if I use the factor, it'll factor it, but then I got to finish it. Now, some of your support will have you only doing the factors, so you can actually do the factor program and stop. But y'all, the quad takes any of these equations set equal to 0, and it will solve it for the final answers. Okay? All right, so let's go back. All right, so we put in our answers and then move to the next one. So the main thing about that problem is you got to get a 0 on the right side. This one has 11w plus w squared plus 10 equals 0. Let's go work that. All right, first thing, everything's got to be in order over here. So you need a w squared first, plus the 11w, plus the 10 is all equal to the 0. So I'm going to factor this now. So remember, you could factor that on the calculator if you wanted to get the factoring part. So W squared means a W and a W. That's a positive. Anytime the last number is positive, both of these factors will have the same sign as the middle number. So they're both going to be positive. If that was a negative 11, both of these would be negative, okay? All right, factors of 10 are 1 and 10, 2 and 5. Since that's positive, you want factors that add to get 11, and that'll be 1 and 10. And y'all, then you're going to what? Set both these equal to 0 and solve. So subtract 1, I get W equals negative 1. Subtract 10, I get W equals negative 10. So notice, two answers, because these are quadratic, and my factors are not the same, okay? So I could have done that on the quad and got to the final answers. I could have factored it and got to the factored form and then finished it on my own, okay? All right, so let's see what they got next. All right, I got a B squared plus 2B equals 0. All right, so I'll share the screen and show you that. And y'all watch this. I'm on the quad program already. On this program, A would be 1, B would be 2, because you got the B term in the middle. So you got your squared term and your term. What you don't have is a number at the end. So on this one, to do the quad, C would be 0. So watch, 1 enter, 2 enter, 0 enter, and it kicks out my two answers. Because remember, since I got a square in here, I need two answers. They could be repeating, but I still need two answers. Now, to do this one by hand, you got a B squared plus 2B. The first thing you would do to this problem, since both terms have a B in them, is you would factor out a GCF of a B. So that'll put that B on the outside. Now, inside the parentheses, when you factor out a GCF, this will be the answer you get by dividing the original binomial by the B. So the B squared divided by the B will leave 1B plus the 2B. If you divide by the B, those B's would cancel and leave a 2. So notice, you set both these factors equal to 0. So 0 can be an answer because I just got it right here. And to get my second answer, I'll solve that by subtracting 2, and I get a negative 2. So I got the two answers that the quad formula gave me. Now let me see something. Let me see if this factor program will factor a binomial like that. A would have been 1, B was 2, and C was 0. So see it on the calculator, in order to use its program, you cannot have a 0 for the last number, okay? So that's why it's not letting me factor it, but I can always use the quad formula to get these answers. So here I'll just put use the quad. So since it wasn't a true trinomial, you're not able to do it on the calculator as far as the factoring goes. All right, so that would have been a 0 and a negative 2, so I would have went to my next problem. So it looks like we're just solving equations now. So this one has r squared minus 16 equals 0, and this is number 11. Now we'll say this. This one I could factor the r squared minus 16 because that's what we call the difference of perfect squares. So let me factor it by hand. So I would factor it by hand first. Now notice, you have the number at the end. What you're missing is the term in the middle that would have been the r. So if I'm using quad in a little bit, I would have A is 1. B would be 0 on this one because there's no r. And then C would be a negative 16. So when you got to put it in the calculator, you put 0 in for the missing terms. So notice on this one, the last number couldn't be the 0 The only thing I could use was the quad. On this one, since it's the middle term that's a 0, I can factor it or use the quad on this one. So let's factor it by hand. You got an r squared, which will be an r and an r. Remember, if the last number is negative, one's positive, one's negative. Factors of 16 are 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. Remember, since there's no r in the middle, that means it's a 0. So I want factors of 16 over here that'll subtract and give me that 0, and that would be 4 and 4. So I put a 4 here and a 4 there. Okay? So last sign's negative, unlike signs. And then basically, the square root of 16 was the 4s. All right, y'all, set these equal to 0 and solve each of them. So I get a -4, and then this one's going to give me a +4. All right, so I'm in my factor program, so let's see this. I would have had a 1, 0, -16. That would have factored into the +4, -4. If I'd have went to my quad, same thing, I'd have put in a 1, 0, -16. It would have gave me my 4 and my -4. So y'all, either way on that, okay? All right, so let's move to the next one. All right, this one is a squared equals 25. So since I just done a squared one like this, I'm going to tell you what you would do on that. You would have to subtract 25 from both sides so that you get a 0 on the right side. Once you got a 0 on the right side, you would have an a squared minus 25 on that left side. Factor it or hit it with the quad. A would be 1, B would be 0, C would be -25. And if you do that, you should get a +5 and a -5 for that answer. Okay? So that was just like the one I did, number 11. They just putting it up different. All right, so this one I'll do. I got 8 plus 2v minus v squared equals 0. All right, so let me go to my screen. So the first thing I'm going to do to this is put it in the right order. So the v squared needs to go first, and it's negative. So you got a -v squared. Then you would put the +2v. Then you would put that +8. All that equal to 0. Now, at this point, you could hit this with the quad. A would be -1. B would be 2. C would be 8. Enter, blah, blah, and you get to 2 answers. If I was doing this one by hand, I don't like my v squared to be negative, so I would divide everybody by a -1. And what I do to this side, I got to do to that side. But watch this. Negative by negative makes that a +v squared. Positive and negative makes that a -2v. Positive and negative makes that a -8. And then 0 divided by anything will still be 0. So you can change every sign as long as you do it to every term, okay? Now this I would factor. V squared would be a v and a v. Last sign's negative, so one's positive, one's negative. Factors of 8 are 1 and 8, and what else? 2 and 4. So I need the ones that subtract and get 2, which are 4 and 2. Now, since the middle is negative, the larger number here will be negative. So the 4 is negative and the 2 is positive. Then you'll set both these equal to 0 and get final answers. So V would be a -2. Here you could add 4 and get V as a +4. What's nice about this one, at this point, you could have did the quad, making the A a -1, B a 2, C a 8. Quad would have knocked that out. Or at this point, you could have used the quad. A would have been 1, B would be -2, C would be -8. Since these are equivalent equations and they came from each other, either one of them would have worked on my quad, okay? All right, so then I'd have moved on. All right, this one has a number in the front. 2t squared plus 15t plus 27 equals 0. All right, so I'm going to factor this, what I call my no fuss method, which is similar to factoring it, and then I'll show you the calculator, knock it out quick. So I'm going to start out with parentheses. T squared is a t and a t. Now we'll take care of this number in the front after a second. Now when you got a number in the front and a number in the back and they can't be factored out as a GCF, you got to multiply the first number times the last. So 2 times 27 is 54. 54 is now the number that you need to find factors that'll equal to 15. So 54 could be 1 in 54, 2 in 27. Let's see, what else? 3 in 18. Let's see, what else? 6 and 9. Those are all the combinations to get 54. The ones that add to get 15, because remember, that's positive. So both of these signs will be positive like that middle number. And then since it's positive, you want factors of this 54 that equal 15 when you add them. And that would be what? 6 and 9. 6 plus 9 is 15. So I get a 6 and a 9. Now here's the thing on the no fuss method. When you have to borrow this 2 and multiply by the last number to get a product, you got to divide the 2 back out of both of these numbers. Okay? So you borrow the 2, multiply by the last number to get a product, find the factors. Once you got your factors, you got to divide both factors by that 2 that you used before. Now, will these factors simplify? So 6 will divide by 2. So 6 divided by 2 will turn into a 3. Now y'all notice on this one, 9 will not divide by 2. 9 will not simplify with the 2. So anytime you get a fraction that has a denominator, you got to take that denominator and move it in front of the variable. So you would put the 2, then the t, plus the 9. All that still equal to 0. Now, I would set both my factors equal to my 0. And then solve them. So the first one, you would subtract 3. You get t is a negative 3. Second one, you got to subtract 9 first. So you get 2t equals negative 9. And then divide both sides by 2. So that the t comes down. That's going to stay negative. Once again, 9 divided by 2 will not reduce. So I'm going to keep that a 9/2. So what I like about this is opposite from that answer. And if you notice up here, this 9/2, that answer is opposite of that answer. So quad would have spit that out quick. So program, let me go to quad. Remember, any of these x squared graphs, quad knocks them all out. So A would have been 2 up here. B would have been 15. C would have been to 27. Hit enter. Now, I don't want decimals, so you hit enter again, and it will turn it into a negative 3 and a negative 9/2. So you always hit enter twice if you want fraction forms or radicals when we get to those, okay? Now, remember at this part where I had it factored? Watch this. Program, let me go to that factor one and show you that it would have factored that. I had a 2, a 15, and a 27. Factoring it, 2x plus 9, x plus 3, which is pretty much what I had, other than I had to use t's on mine, okay? All right, so let's see what they got next. What's that? A 12b squared plus a b equals 6. So let's do this one by hand. Now remember, y'all could use any of them. You could factor it or use the quad. The first thing you have to do, no matter what, is make that a 0 over there where that 6 is. You can't use none of these if you don't have a 0 over here, okay? Now, none of these are like terms. That's a b and that's a 6. So this is 12b squared plus a b minus 6 is now equal to 0. So at that point, if you want to hit it with the quad or hit it with a factor, you can. I'm going to factor this by hand to get you all used to that no fuss stuff, okay? So b squared would be a b and a b. That's negative, so one's positive, one's negative. 12 times 6 is 72. So now I need factors of 72 that are going to subtract and give me a 1. And I know what that is. That's going to be 9 and 8. Because remember, since that's no number there, we treat the middle one like a 1 since the variable's there. You can only put a 0 if the variable's gone, okay? So since the middle was positive, the larger number is going to be positive. So the 9 will be positive, 8 will be negative. Also remember, since I had to borrow the 12 and multiply by the 6, I now need to divide both of them by that 12. Now, watch this. The first thing I'm going to do is reduce 9 over 12. Reduces to a 3/4. 8 over 12, they both divide by 4. That's going to give you a 2 over 3. Now remember, since they got bottoms left of their fractions, I got to take those denominators and move them in front of the variables. So this one gives me a 4b plus 3. This one gives me a 3b minus 2, all equal to my 0. Now y'all, 4 times 3 is my 12. 3 times 2 is the 6 at the end. So I'd be happy with that. Now, set both these equal to 0 and solve. But remember, you see these two fractions that I had reduced? I bet my answers are the same as those fractions, but they have opposite signs. So watch this. We'll subtract 3. 4b equals negative 3. Divide by 4. b equals a negative 3/4 for that one. Opposite then a positive. And then here I'm going to add 2. So 3b equals 2. Divide them by the 3. And b equals a positive 2/3. So what I love about this no fuss method, once you get it to these simplified forms, all you got to do is change them signs and you got your final answers. Okay? Now, quad would have done that. Factoring, you could have got it factored to this point and then finished the rest by hand if you wanted. But hell, if you're using programs, might as well knock them all the way out with that quad, right? All right, we're getting close to being done with these. All right, what's that? 2v squared minus 98 equals 0. So if you was going to use quad, A would be 2. There's no V term in the middle, so the B would be 0. C would be a negative 98. Okay. So in this section, we hadn't learned about doing square root stuff, so I'm just going to factor this one like I would, okay? So do you notice these all have a GCF in them? All three of these would divide by 2, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is make this easier by dividing everybody by 2. Anytime you can divide numbers by something common, do that, because watch this. 2 divided by 2, that's going to be a v squared minus 98 divided by 2 is 49, and then 0 divided by 2 is 0. Now what I would do is factor. V squared would be a v and a v. Last number is negative, so one's positive, one's negative. Since there's no v in the middle, b is 0, we said, which means I need factors of 49 that'll subtract and get a 0, which would be 7 and 7. So that's the perfect squares again. So all you got to do is take the square root of that last number and you get your numbers, and then we offset both these equal to 0. So you're going to get v equals a -7. And then here you would add 7 and get v is a +7. Remember, these are perfect squares, and they always factored into what we called conjugate pairs. Conjugate pairs are factors that look the same other than the operation. One will be added and one will be subtracted, okay? All right, so let's see what's next. All right, I'll do this one because we got a cube on this one. 10c cubed equals 90c. So let's do this one. Now, the programs will not do these problems when they got exponents of 3 in them, okay? So the first thing we do want to do, this needs to be a 0, so we're going to subtract that 90c from both sides. So notice what I get. These are not like terms. So 10c to the third minus 90c is going to equal 0. All right, so remember, you got GCFs on here. So the GCF, both of these have a 10 in these numbers, and both of these have at least a C in them. So since the 10C will be my GCF, I'm going to divide both of these by the 10C and put that answer here. So 10 divided by 10 is 1. C3 divided by C leaves me a C squared minus 90C divided by the 10C leaves me a 9 because those C's cancel. So now you got a 10C here. This part in the middle will now factor further because this is perfect squares. C squared is a C and a C. Last sign's negative, so one's positive, one's negative. They got to equal 0, so the square root of 9 is 3 and 3. Perfect squares. See, perfect squares, if you get used to them, you just take the square roots of them numbers and be done. All right, so at this point, you would set everything equal to 0. And guess what? Since you got an exponent 3, we're going to get 3 answers. So the first one divided by 10, C is still going to be 0. So the GCF always gives you 0 for its answer, 100%. Here I do -3, C equals a -3. Then here I will do a +3 and get C equals a +3. So when you got cubes in there, you got to get me 3 answers. All right, let's see. I think I had a cube to factor again. I'm pretty sure. All right, this says let f of x equal x squared plus 13x plus 44. And they want me to find a so that f of a equals 2. All right, so basically what they want you to do on this question, they're telling me f of a equals 2, so that means they want me to set this whole thing x squared plus 13x plus, what was that, 44 has to equal 2. Okay, now I could replace these x's with a's since they're giving me that for the variable. So if you want to be official, a squared plus 13a plus 44 has to equal 2. Well, we just learned to solve that, where that 2 is, needs to be a 0, so we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. Now, since this already had all 3 parts, you do have like terms with that number, okay? So a squared comes down, plus 13a. 44 minus 2 is a positive 42, all equal at 0. Now, after you did that work and got all this, now you could do a is 1, b is 13, c is 42, and factor it on the quad or factor it on that program, okay? Which y'all watch this. A squared is a and a. Last sign's positive, so both factors will be positive like that middle number. Factors of 42 that equal 13 would be 6 and 7. Okay? Now, I'm going to send y'all a program later that's called Factors 2. Go to Factors 2 and hit Enter. and then enter again to start it. I want all factors, and the number I want all factors was my 42. When I hit enter, there's all the factors, and I found the ones that equal 13 would be 6 and 7. Okay, now take both these, set them equal to 0, and solve that one by subtracting 6, so that A is a negative 6. Subtract 7 on that one, and get A is a negative 7. Then you would go back and put them answers in. And see, I'd put them in A's like they got. Then you would have A equals negative 6, comma, negative 7. All right, y'all, we are down to the last one, number 19. G of x is going to equal 2x squared plus 5x. Find A so that G of A equals 42. So that looks about like the same as I just did, right? So I know that this will really be 2a squared plus 5a equals 42. So replace it with the a's and then set it equal to 42. That's what they're wanting me to do. Once again, this has to be 0, so subtract the 42 from both sides. But notice this time the 42 is not like terms, so I'm just going to put them in order. 2a squared plus 5a minus 42 is going to equal 0. Now, I cannot divide out this 2, unfortunately, so I'm going to factor it doing my no fuss. Or you can hit it with the quad, 2, 5, negative 42. All right, y'all, watch this. I got an A and an A. Last sign's negative, so one's positive, one's negative. So 2 times 42 is 84. I'm going to have to find factors of 84 that'll subtract and give me 5. So I'm going to cheat and go to my program for factors of a number, which is factors 2, enter, and then enter the number I need is 84. So I want all factors of 84, enter. And they got to subtract and get 5, okay? So do I got that yet? Those are too big, 14 and 6. Oh, 12 and 7 will work. 12 minus 7 will give you 5. Now remember, the larger number 12 has the same sign as the middle, so it's positive, and the 7 will be negative. Now watch, if that wasn't all the factors, you hit enter, and if there were any more factors, it would have pulled them there, okay? All right, now remember, since I multiplied by 2 to get this product, I now got to divide both these by the 2. So 12 will divide by 2, make that a 6. Here, 7 will not divide by 2, so I got to take the 2 and put it in front of the A, so I get a 2a minus 7. And then, y'all, since I'm factored, I now set them equal to 0 and solve. So once again, I get an A, which is a negative 6. Over here, I'm going to add 7. So 2a equals 7, and then divide by 2, so that A equals a 7 halves. So watch this. Program quad. What's that quad at? Enter, and then enter to start. So I would have put in my 2, 5, negative 42. Now, if you left that 42 over there and made it positive, you're not going to get the right answer. Now remember, I got to hit enter again because I don't want decimals, and there's my negative 6, 7 halves. Watch what would have happened if you did 2, 5, and say you didn't bring the 42 over and you left it positive. Well, y'all, these are imaginary numbers, I's in them. We ain't even messed with no imaginary numbers on these yet. So just remember, when you put that in, you got to have everything set to 0 for these to work. All right, y'all, and I think that was my last one. So I'm going to quit this. And I'm going to send those videos later. And good luck.